Hi everyone. This video is a book review about a person from history that is one of my very favorite heroes. And the title of this book is Malcolm Little, the boy who grew up to become Malcolm X. And it was written by his daughter, Ilyasa Shabazz, and illustrated by one of my favorite illustrators, A.G. Ford. So yesterday was Malcolm X's birthday, and I really wanted to upload a book review, but I didn't have the time. I didn't have the time to make it, and I just was ill prepared. So it kind of went against the quote that Malcolm X had said in his life, which was, "The future belongs to those who prepare for it today," and obviously I was not prepared. So I'm going to make it up with this book review video a day late. I have my Malcolm X button that I've had for several years. I also have a Marcus Garvey button that people have been trying to buy from me since I first got it. The reason I have Marcus Garvey is because Malcolm X's parents were Garveyites, and Marcus Garvey's philosophies were an integral part of their household. So I have his button here too. I really like Malcolm X as a historical figure because I see him as one of the more human historical figures. I like that he gave himself the opportunity to change his mind or change his opinions and was always on a pathway of growth, which is something I really like seeing. Some historical figures will be stuck in their ways, and they'll just have all these different things, and others will transform, kind of like a butterfly. So before I get into the book and all of the things that I learned from it, let me share with you a little bit about the author and the illustrator. So the author, which is Malcolm X's daughter, or one of his daughters, is Ilyasa Shabazz. She's a very beautiful, intelligent, and talented lady. I'm on her website right now, which I will put in the description box below. So it says in her bio on her website, Professor Ilyasa Shabazz promotes higher education for at-risk youth, interfaith dialogue to build bridges between cultures for young leaders of the world, and she participates in international humanitarian delegations. She served as a member of the U.S. delegation that accompanied President Bill Clinton to South Africa to commemorate the election of President Nelson Mandela and the Education of Economic Development Initiatives. She was a member of the U.S. Interfaith Leadership Delegation to Mali, West Africa, with Malaria No More, and she received a personal letter of acknowledgement for preserving her father's proud legacy by working to secure equality in our time and for generations to come from President Barack Obama. She is an inspirational role model and advocate for youth and women and girl empowerment. Her life work is devoted to helping others find inner strength and purpose. While she is frequently asked to speak about the legacy of Malcolm X, she shares that it is her mother, Dr. Betty Shabazz's wisdom, courage, and compassion that guide her. More than 6 years experience as a college professor, more than 20 years experience as administrator and implementer of cultural and community outreach initiatives, serving diverse populations, key advisor to public and private organizations, developing diversity and community-focused programs that align with business, academic, and organizational goals, author, artist, mentor, educator, motivational speaker, and citizen of the world, connecting and activating networks and resources to create measurably positive outcomes, published 5 multiple award-winning publications with outstanding novelist, currently working on the next. This lady is literally powerful. I love reading about Malcolm X's daughters because like most of them are just amazing. Like they're just doing everything. They're literally like super women for real. And nothing gets in their way of preserving their father and mother's legacy. So as I was going on her site, I did learn a couple of things. So on her site, she has a page which is about her father, Malcolm X. She also has a page about her mother, Dr. Betty Shabazz. And I did not know that there was the Shabazz Center. I didn't know there was something like that that existed. And it's the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Memorial, an educational center at the Audubon, transforms the site of my father's martyrdom into an oasis of support for the ongoing struggle for social justice. This literally reminds me of the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. I think I may have some video footage from when I went several years ago. It's basically the Lorraine Motel where Dr. King was assassinated, and they turned it into a museum. So I just thought it was interesting that this too was turned into like a memorial and educational center. And she also talks about like how her mother had a good hand in it, like um giving them ideas and direction for like the murals and the statues and everything. So I think one day I would really like to visit there and take you with me there if I am able to go to it someday. Or I'll just look on YouTube and see if there's any type of tours there. She also has a list of different books, which I have seen before just from working in a bookstore. I recognize some of the books like Betty Before X, which is a children's book, the X, a novel paperback, The Boy Who Grew Up to Become Malcolm X, and all sorts of other books. Then, let us see, she has a page with interviews, video interviews. It's just a very amazing website. So I think you should check it out and learn more. I think you'll really enjoy it. So the next person we are going to talk about is A.G. Ford, who is one of my favorite illustrators. He is a very successful author and illustrator. Let's see. We're going to go to his bio. I think I may have either reviewed some of the books that he wrote on here or some of the books that he illustrated. I do know upon looking up on his page of books, there were books that I have read before or sold to people before. It says A.G. Ford is a New York Times best-selling children's book illustrator and recipient of 2 NAACP Image Awards. He grew up in Dallas, Texas. Ford attended the Columbus College of Art and Design, majoring in illustration. He has illustrated picture books for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Sharon Robinson, Ilyasa Shabazz, Martin Luther King III, Nick Cannon, Jonah Winter, the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and many others. Mr. Ford has over 30 published books for children, including picture books, chapter books such as the Magic Treehouse series, and YA covers, which is, library speak for young adult. He has worked with publishers such as HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, Scholastics, Penguin Random House, Candlewick Press, and more. He lives in Frisco, Texas with his lovely wife, Brandy, and their 2 sons, Maddox and Carter. Ooh, hey, you doing it. I love it. So some of the books that he has, I recognize. So let's see the ones I recognize. He has one about Barack Obama's 2008. I recognize Our Children Can Soar. He was one of the illustrators for that. The What Color Is My World? I've seen that before. My Daddy Martin. I've read that one. Brown Baby Lullaby. I may have briefly touched on that one. Irene's Wish. Yep. Well, he wrote one about Johnny Cash too? What? I didn't know that. Okay. I see. So, oh, the What Color Is My World? I remember this. It was History of Black Inventors, different things. I don't know if he illustrated it or not. Then he has a store. Ooh, this is nice. The store is coming soon, so what is that? Munchkin Land? Wait, what? Okay, hold up. I was confused for a second because that literally looked like it was straight out of The Wizard of Oz. He has a list of awards. 2015 Jefferson Cup Award for Young Readers, Society of Illustrators Award, Children's Africana Book Award. So this illustrator is serious as a heart attack. So I think it is two very talented people coming together to make a very powerful book. This book was published in 2013, so it is a decade old. I wonder if they are going to have a 10-year anniversary edition. I loved every single page of this book. Like, he went in on this book. It's dedicated to Earl and Louise, which is Ilyasa Shabaz's grandparents, and to my father and mother, Al and Gwen Ford. That's what A.G. Ford wrote. This is an imprint of Simon & Schuster children's books. It's Athenaeum Books for Young Readers. I wonder what the illustrations are rendered in oil paint. That's what I thought. So this page starts off with a beautiful painting of Malcolm X's mother and father. This is Louise, and this is Earl. It says, Malcolm X was one of the most influential men in American history, but before he became Malcolm X, he was Malcolm Little. Malcolm was born on May 19th, 1925 in the small Midwestern town of Omaha, Nebraska. I have some family in Nebraska. I've only been there one time, but I think maybe I'll go again and see if there's anything there with any type of historical sites, if they have anything there for Malcolm X. He was born into a tight-knit family with parents who not only encouraged his natural curiosity as a boy, but also taught him lessons about discipline, fortitude, and self-determination. So his father, it says, was a smooth, dark skin as beautiful as the midnight sky. And he was from Georgia, and his mother was Louise Norton, Malcolm X's mother. She was born in Grenada, West Indies, and it was known as the Spice Island, where the sweet smell of nutmeg and cocoa swirled together. She was a bright student who excelled at reading and math, and you'll start seeing this as we go further along in the book, like how her education was incorporated into how she raised her children. She began asking questions at an early age about the mistreatment of people of color in her hometown. After Louise graduated from school, she left for Montreal, Canada, to join her uncle Edgerton, who was a co-founder of the Marcus Garvey movement. In Montreal, Louise met the giant gentleman named Earl Little. Both of them had traveled to Montreal, focused on joining the struggle for freedom and justice. I just think that's interesting how no matter how far you are, if you're supposed to be soulmates or supposed to be together or supposed to collaborate on something, the universe will send or will find a way to make you come together. I love this picture right here. It's their wedding. This is so beautiful. Oh my gosh, look at this dress. She looks like a princess. For real. Earl and Louise were soon married. The couple moved to the rural Midwest and soon became the parents of 7 children: Wilfred, Hilda, Filbert, Malcolm, Reginald, Yvonne, and Wesley. Earl and Louise cherished their family and instilled in their children values of faith in God and self-love, of honesty and integrity and brotherhood. The little children were happy and romped endlessly around the little home and land in Omaha, Nebraska. Malcolm was the middle child. He was full of questions, a natural leader, and a fun-loving prankster. Now, what's really interesting is near the end of the book, Ilyasa writes a little bit more about her grandparents. And it says, hold on. She said something about her grandmother, but I don't know if it was her or if I'm mistaking it for somebody else. From what I've read online, the mother would get odd jobs, but she would pass for white. But I don't know how true that was, because when I look at her photos, I'm like, how? But with black and white photographs, sometimes the person does look darker than they actually are, because my grandmother was very light-skinned, but when I look at black and white photos of her, you can't see it. It's not true to her actual skin tone. She looks darker in the photos when she was actually kind of light. And I just hear conflicting reports about her and her views, some of them based off of what Malcolm X said, and others based off of what other people have written. So I really want to read more about her and his father as well. But I thought it was really interesting that they're both Garveyites, and they instilled Garvey's principles into their children, which really helped shape how Malcolm X became as he got older. It says, when Malcolm was 4 years old, something horrifying happened that he would never forget. So what ended up happening was their house was set on fire. And they later learned that the flames had been set by townspeople who disagreed with their family's belief about universal equality and justice. I know that a lot of people didn't like his father having these Garveyite meetings. They saw it as a threat, which I just think is so ironic, because you hate me so much and I'm doing something to get myself away from you. You don't want to see me, so I'm actually doing you a favor, trying to get people on the Black Star Line to go back to Africa, but you're mad that I'm leaving you. I'm leaving your proximity. Do you want me near or do you want me away? Which one is it? It's psychotic. You must want me near, because every time I go away, you follow me. this toxic relationship. So that's what ended up getting his father in a lot of trouble and eventually cutting his life short. As we will find out later on in the book. Another thing that I found out just by reading different articles was that his mother didn't believe or didn't allow her children to eat pork or rabbit. And I think even this basic belief probably helped with his transition into Islam, because I know you can't eat pork, or at least from what I've read or heard and seen in people that practice Islam, like not eating pork, not touching it, and different things. And also with like Israelites, I've seen before, like that don't eat pork. So I think his mother's early influence made it easier for him to, I guess, transition into Islam. Another thing that dawned on me was how his early education from his parents continued even when he was in prison. And his mind was already sharp. His mind was already eager to learn things. So like when they came and recruited him and converted him or helped him to convert to Islam, it was already, easy because he already had an intuitive mind. Which this painting right here looks so beautiful. Like, I love this picture. I love seeing paintings of like fathers and sons, or daughters and fathers, and I just really like it because a lot of people don't have fathers in their lives, so it's always nice to see it in a book. And I love how A.G. Ford painted him to just look so little. He's just so little with his little red hair. Despite the great loss of their house and all their belongings, they vowed to rebuild their lives, armed not with material possessions, but instead with optimism and faith. After Earl and Louise knew that possessions come and go, but faith, love, and perseverance would sustain them. Earl purchased 6 acres of land in Lansing, Michigan, and he basically built the family house from scratch. And Malcolm in the book asks, "Papa, how come we don't have windows in our house?" Earl answered with total confidence, "Son, when we can afford the glass, our frames will be filled." He leaned over to look squarely into Malcolm's eyes. All good things begin with a fundamental structure. From that moment on, whenever Malcolm felt the wind blow through those empty window frames, instead of wondering when the glass would come, he would think of his father's unstoppable optimism and faith. So apparently, it seemed like his father was a preacher, which I didn't know he was a preacher. Or I don't know if he was a preacher or if he just was like, hold on. I guess he was like a preacher. Because in this image, he has like a Bible and he has a top hat. And so he must have been a preacher. But I didn't know that. I just thought he was, a Garveyite. Malcolm's father would preach about faith, self-reliance, and hard work to throngs of people gathered at local churches and assemblies. The grown-ups in the audience listened intently, their eyes fixed on Earl, their ears on his words, and their souls in his message. Malcolm's father reminded them that they were not merely the descendants of slaves, but that their African ancestors built some of the greatest civilizations ever recorded in history, and that they too could stand together to build a bright future for their children. These were the lessons in hope and self-determination that Malcolm would grow to love. I just thought that was really fascinating because during that time, you probably had a lot of Black people who did not have that mindset. You're talking about a time when, what was it, Birth of a Nation had either just come out or was about to come out, where you're still being viewed as an assailant in different things. You're still being lynched. You still had textbooks that made you appear as if you were subhuman or something. So I really think it's interesting how he incorporated his Garveyite views into his, I guess, if it was using the Bible, his biblical teachings. So that's probably why he became so dangerous for real, because you're blending two powerful things. Even if people don't believe your beliefs about Garveyite, once you take the religion into it and you can make them see your viewpoint, it's, of course, some type of racist is going to feel threatened, because you're going to start acting empowered. You can't give somebody empowerment in their mind and expect them to act small forever. So that is probably why, another reason why his life was cut short. I also think his father's oratory speeches, or was it orator? I guess I'm going to say oratory, influenced Malcolm in how he spoke. Maybe he spoke how his father spoke. Maybe that's why he was such a great speaker, because you had his mother giving him private tutoring, and then you had his father who already did public speaking, and that's why he was such a dynamic person to listen to. It says, so just as Malcolm found inspiration from his father's speeches at church, he learned some unexpected lessons from his mother's garden at home. So this is his mother and him in the garden. It's so beautiful. And the author goes on and on about how diligently the mother taught her children about nature and gardening and growing food and really watching the transformation of plants. Malcolm would also learn about the importance of roots, nature's anchors, the base of every living creature, and through the outspread wings of the chirping birds above, he began to see the power of possibility. So his mother wanted to teach each child how to take care of their food and different things. So she gave each of them a plot of land where they had to grow their own food and take care of it. So teaching them basic farming skills. They had to learn to plant, water, trim, and harvest the crops, which in turn planted the seeds for hard work and their sense of self-reliance. What I really like about this book is it's one of the few books where you can see Malcolm X from the perspective of just pure innocence. Like some books and documentaries will portray him as just so aggressive or so volatile or so militant, but writing from the perspective of a person that loved him, and for those who actually knew him personally, it's a different take. Like you can see him in a more innocent light and connect with him more, because there wasn't just one aspect of him. He had multifaceted personality. Hold up. So it goes on and talks about his mother. Here's another. She's with her children. So apparently, I did not know this, but his mother, according to this book, was fluent in like 5 different languages. And she taught them the alphabets of the 5 different languages that she knew. She would bake biscuits while discussing philosophy, sweep the floor while reciting poetry, and teach math while pruning the garden. With one hand, she would tend to the linens, and in the other hand, she would hold an open book, and Malcolm and his siblings would listen on. Let's see. While folding fresh laundry, Louise would also unfold a newspaper from another country for her children to read, a window into the world and a way to connect with the rest of humanity, brothers and sisters across the globe. Even though the children went to school, she knew that the best education they would receive would begin at home, and that information was one of the greatest gifts she could give to them. I really like this lady. When I was reading this book, it inspired me even more to homeschool my children when I have them. I already plan on homeschooling my children when I have them. I decided that in my 20s, but I like seeing examples from history that show how successful it could be. And she had the right idea. Like, people will send their children to school and just expect the child to get a decent education. And I'm saying, as a tutor, I tutored from age 14 through 23 and then a little bit up to 26. They're not going to get a full education. The best education you can give them in addition to school or maybe besides school is an independent education. The schools basically will do the bare minimum to teach your child. They come out of school only knowing one language fluently or maybe another language barely. They're not fluent in multiple languages. They don't know how to build a house. They don't know how to grow their own food or sew their own clothes. They don't know global history. They're just throwing these children out into the world uninspired and uneducated. So it makes sense for his mother to have done that, because look at the times that they're in, or that they were in. Look at the racist society that they were in. She knew not to trust these people with her children. She knew they would learn better at home than at a school, which would probably go out of their way to lie and limit her children. You see, Louise Little knew the real truth about words. She knew that they were more than just a jumble of letters all lined up in perfect row. She showed him the magic of words. She taught young Malcolm how to appreciate the dictionary and exposed him to the world of books. She firmly believed that knowledge acquired today would transform into wisdom tomorrow. The theme of the butterfly is shown throughout this book. Like, when you read this book, it's going to come up multiple times. And it starts on page, well, this page doesn't have a number, but it says, "Do you see that beautiful butterfly, Malcolm? Well, believe it or not, there was a time when that butterfly thought of itself as ugly, frightened, and all alone. It did not understand the value of its own little life. It had to learn about patience because it had no idea what the future would hold. It had to develop and mature and blossom. And now look at it. It's beautiful, proud, smart, and free." And apparently, Malcolm X had a butterfly collection. I found that out at the end of the book. It was like in a wooden box. My father's collection of opulently colored butterflies encased in cherry wood and glass also proved to be an invaluable source of inspiration for writing this book. Each one of them was unique, beautiful, magnificent, and worthy of attention. I wish there was a photograph of it, unless it's at the museum. And it just goes on talking about his life. But then what ended up happening was his father was unalived, probably by the Klan. And Malcolm X talks about it in his autobiography. I did have his autobiography back in maybe 2010 or 2011, but what's his face at school, Jose, took my book and he's like, "Let me borrow your book," and I never got it back. So that's why I don't let people borrow my books. I just don't let them borrow it, because I still remember that Jose. It's been like, yeah, I remember. It's been like 12 years. But I do remember Malcolm X mentioning something about his father being unalived by the Klan. They found him basically mangled on the railroad tracks. Very, very disturbing. It became clear that the hate and fury that was behind the fire that burned the little house down many years ago was now back again. Only this time the hate was so strong, it took Earl Little away from his family forever. So not long after that, their family got broken apart. His mother, they say, had a nervous breakdown, which, I mean, who could blame her? Like, you have 7 kids to take care of, and then your husband is unalived in the most brutal way, and you have to keep caring for your family. Like, I don't see how she could be in the right mind. I don't see it. And it was the Great Depression. It says, soon local officials began to assert that Louise was no longer fit to care for her children, and they threatened to take away the family land. The proud, loving mother on whom the children depended was now being taken from them for reasons that no one dared to explain. So the children were essentially separated. Some went to foster care. Some of them went just different places. The whole family was broken apart. And his mother went to Kalamazoo Hospital, and she stayed there for years. She stayed in that hospital for years, and eventually she did get out. She died maybe 26 years after Malcolm X was unalived. Very sad. Very, very sad. So, near the end of the book, it talks about Malcolm became disobedient and required the structure of reform school, but due to his academic adeptness, he was eventually enrolled in Mason Junior High School. When he arrived, he was the only student of color. Malcolm felt like a fish out of water. His brothers and sisters were gone. He missed the sound of his mother's voice. He longed for the passionate speeches his father gave about the teachings of Marcus Garvey. He yearned to hear the gifted orator inspire people to care about history, justice, and equal rights for all mankind. As the only African American student in his new school, Malcolm would have to blaze his own path towards discovering the remaining truth of his identity. I actually can relate to this because there was one time I was the only black girl in school. There were 3 black people and I was the only black girl in the entire school. I would be the only black girl in my entire grade until the 5th grade. So I understand how it feels to just be like stuck out. And you have all of these curriculums around you being so racist and trying to do it under the table, like on the sly. Like his racism was in his face and at school, but mine most of the time was just interwoven into my curriculum and side comments and just other things that I wasn't old enough to understand. Now that I look back, I'm like, okay, if you did that today, you're going to be shut down. So, one morning, the English teacher, Mr. Ostrowski, asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up. Malcolm, who was sitting straight up in his chair, proudly announced that he wanted to be a lawyer. His grades were certainly high enough to set him on this path, but his teacher did not believe that African Americans should have high expectations for themselves or aspire to excel. He did not believe that people like Malcolm should dream, hope, plan, or succeed. But Malcolm was old enough to understand that Mr. Ostrowski was terribly wrong. I remember reading about this in his book, even though I haven't read his book in like years, like a little over a decade. his teacher was like, well, you can't because you're black. And when I went to go look for the quote from the book as I searched online, there was something I read where it said, even though he told Malcolm that he couldn't do it, he encouraged other students who were not black, like non-black students, to pursue their dreams, even though they were just as poor as Malcolm. I've seen that happen in this day and age too. I remember as a tutor, one of the after-school programs, I saw it firsthand. A teacher discourage a child from a career field. There were two teachers. One was this young white lady who would always encourage the children. You can be anything you want to be. You can. And she had a hard time at the school because, like, I don't think people accepted her views. I think she was in her 20s. She was, like, too progressive. The one that was kind of just racist was maybe in her 40s or her 50s, and you could just tell how racist she was. You could just look at her facial expressions. So she was rolling her eyes at this child's dream. But thankfully, Malcolm X's barrier was his father's and mother's wisdom instilled in him, the training that they gave him, the philosophies of Marcus Garvey that they placed into his head of pride. My mother, she gave me books that had people that looked like me, and she had me surrounded with people who would inspire me and encourage me to read about my history and just give me more self-esteem, because my books weren't doing that. So that's why Malcolm knew he could reach that level. If he had just been a child who didn't have that type of exposure that his mother and father had given him, I think it would have completely broken him. He probably would have gone on a completely different path, but I think he would have been a good lawyer, for real. But in his life, I guess he kind of was on that path. He went more into the political field, so I think he was kind of close to what he wanted to be. And just as nothing had ever stopped Earl, Malcolm learned how to rise up with that same bold determination that made his father a family hero. He had good ideas and good friends at school, and the can-do attitude to make something of that promising combination. Whenever Malcolm would tell a story or a joke, the kids would all gather around, their eyes fixed on the charismatic boy who was clearly different from them, but somehow or someone whom they adored and respected just the same. And then one day something extraordinary happened. Malcolm Little, the boy who was raised on the vision of freedom and justice, was elected class president by the students in his 7th grade class. When they looked at Malcolm, they no longer saw a mournful child lost in the world. Now they saw a smart, insightful, charming winner. They voted for a leader who believed in equality and who radiated optimism. Their open-mindedness symbolized hope for generations to come. Look at this picture. See, this is what makes this book so different from all of the books I've read about him, where people try to make him seem he was just such a hateful man. This book makes him seem more loving. It makes him seem more like human. It shows the childlike version of him that other books do not show, because it was written by somebody who actually loved him. I don't know why when I looked at this page and I was reading this passage, I actually had a flashback to when I was like 23 or 22 or 23, and I was working at a day camp. And there was a teacher there who was a reading teacher who just hated Marcus Garvey and he hated Malcolm X. And he's like, what do you think about Marcus Garvey? He was trying to make people leave, and he was this and he was that. Well, that's your perspective. That's your perspective. And I think Malcolm X's story has been written by people who have that perspective. They only want to see one aspect of him. They're not trying to see where he was coming from, you know? That's why he was able to have so many viewpoints as he was developing. He was not the same man over the course of time. And the book ends with, Malcolm may have lost his family, but he never lost the values for which the little family stood. And for the rest of his life, whenever doubt, sadness, fear, or pain will come creeping into his thoughts, he would firmly hold on to one constant force that always gave true meaning to his family life, love. It's so beautiful. Al-Hajj Malik, I don't know if it's Malik or Malik, El-Shabazz, circled the globe in the final months of his life to advocate egalitarianism for all, regardless of religion, gender, ethnicity. I share his youthful example of overcoming life's obstacles to ultimately achieve excellence and to give selfless service as a means to empower the achievement of each reader's full potential for the benefit of humanity. I believe the universal message of my father's life story will resonate with all children because it says, "This is who I am. I am love." I love this book. I highly recommend this book if you are building your own historical collection, if you have a classroom and you want to just have children's books for your class or your students to, relate to the historical figure in their age group. I think this is a good gift for Kwanzaa, the Black History Month. To add to your collection, if you have a Malcolm X book collection, shoot, add that one. I want to get more of the books written by his daughters because the more you learn about somebody, the more you see the true humanity of them. There's not just one aspect of all of us. We all have different versions of ourselves that we are becoming. As we age, as we grow, we just become better and better and more wise over the course of time. So thank you all for watching this video. I hope you have a happy reading, and I'll talk to you soon.